UKIP.
UKIP spokesperson Neil Hamilton.
Inland fisheries and freshwater fishing is an important part of the rural economy. The Environment Agency has estimated there are about 1,500 jobs in Wales that depend directly upon it. And whilst we're all concerned about the levels of salmon and sea trout in our rivers in Wales, I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary could give me her views upon the Natural Resources Wales's proposals to introduce a 10-year mandatory catch and release policy, and also to introduce a blanket ban on anglers taking any salmon they catch to eat. The angling fraternity is very concerned about this because obviously taking home one's catch is an integral part of fishing for many anglers and for enjoyment of sport. There is a possibility that if the result of this is to deter people coming to Wales in particular to enjoy our rivers for fishing, that could have a detrimental effect also upon tourism in the countryside.
I'm waiting for Natural Resources Wales to supply their recommendations following their consultation on this. So I'm expecting it probably within the next 2 months. So I don't, at the moment I can't comment.
Okay. Well, I understand the Cabinet Secretary's position on that. There are very diverse reasons for the decline in fish stocks in our rivers, and one of them is predation by fish-eating birds. And there's a great deal of evidence now. The Angling Trust has produced a database, for example, of predators within inland situations, and apparently cormorants are now a significant factor in this. Although they're fundamentally seabirds, lots of them are taking fish from our rivers and posing, I think, a dire threat to particularly young salmon. There are licences which are granted for taking predators and so reducing the scale of this problem. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would consider making it easier to qualify for these licences, and this at least would be a partial solution to a growing problem that we've got with our rivers.
Again, that's not an issue that's been raised with me, but I will ask my colleague, the Minister for Environment, to raise it with NRW at her next meeting.
And I suppose the elephant in the room for most people is the extent of river pollution. And I know that this is a much bigger issue than just in relation to fish stocks. And we've had many a debate here about proposals for nitrate vulnerable zones and so on. But although nobody denies that there is a problem with pollution, it is being addressed by voluntary action to a great extent. We've drawn attention in the past to the schemes which exist in Pembrokeshire and which have been very successful. Pollution does kill far more salmon and sea trout each year than the proposals which NRW have put forward for controls on exploitation by nets and fishermen of salmon and sea trout would save. And so this is a problem which should be viewed in the round rather than ascribed to one cause over another. And so I hope that when she considers NRW's proposal, she will introduce a sense of proportion into the proposals which they have put on the table, because there's a feeling that in Wales, NRW is proposing something which is far more draconian than will be applied in England in particular, and therefore going back to what we were talking about earlier on in Simon Thomas's question of discussions with your counterpart in England on agricultural issues, we do need to inform ourselves in Wales of the position in other parts of the United Kingdom and the proposals for improvement which other ministers are bringing in, and we mustn't disadvantage fishermen in Wales in particular unnecessarily.
I think proportionality is very important in any steps that you take, and you mentioned about voluntary action, and certainly the reason I brought forward the statement I did on MVZs was because whilst I don't think the current voluntary sort of schemes have worked in a way that we would want to, and we've seen significant agricultural pollution of our rivers, for instance, I do think that if you can work with the sector, it's much better than bringing forward legislation, and that's why I brought forward the statement I have. But again, I will ask the Minister for Environment to raise it with NRW at her next regular meeting.
Question 3.